Well, I was born Rebecca Sargent Kendall on December 27th, 1939. I know. That makes me 75 and a half years old right now. And it's a big secret. Shh, shh. I'm talking to the videographer now. You guys didn't even know my age, let alone my friends.
70s, but I didn't.
Yeah. Yeah. So here's why I wanted to make this video. There are many questions that I never asked my parents. I'm not sure they would have answered anyway. But now that they're gone, and Bob Sengelman is so handicapped by his stroke and can't talk, I'm not sure he can think very well either, there's no one left to ask so many questions that I have. So I thought, well, you might be interested in knowing some of your history, your family history. You might want to know some things about me that are kind of blank spots. But mostly what I wanted to make sure you know is that I have a lot of regrets for bringing you into a world that you didn't really deserve, because our family was very dysfunctional. Your dad and I were not really prepared to be parents, but we went ahead anyway. And as you know, alcohol played a huge role in our lives back then. And so I've gotten over the guilt feelings now, because I'm making living amends to all of you. But I do want you to know that I'm aware of our shortcomings. I'm aware of where I could have improved my parenting. I didn't have the tools at the time. I really didn't know better. My own parents were also kids of alcoholics. Then they became alcoholics. It's been a genetic disorder in both sides of the family, Bob's and mine, for as far back as we know. So I promised Eric a long time ago I would quit with the I'm sorries. But you know, I want to acknowledge to the rest of you that I am aware. I'm so sorry about that, and I hope in these last sober years that I've been, you know, kind of reversing some of our history. Anyway, so I told you when I was born and what my name was. Sargent is kind of a funny family name. It isn't spelled like the military rank. It's S-A-R-G-E-N-T, like the artist, but I don't know if we were related. And I was born in a suburb of Philadelphia called Chestnut Hill. And I guess it was a very chic place. But I can tell you our little apartment wasn't very chic, because at the time, my father worked for Esso Standard Oil, and my mother was just a house mom. And so they didn't have very much income at all. When she married my father, the promise was that since his uncle was chairman of the board of Standard Oil, that he would just immediately move into a very prestigious position. But oh no, he had other ideas. He wanted to make it on his own. So here is my mother, such a snob, such a socialite, a New York debutante, and she's married now and living in an apartment in Philadelphia to a grease monkey. That's where he started. And I think throughout her marriage, she was always so disappointed in her choice. She really wanted to marry an English lord, and she just got my dad. And they were kind of country aristocrats. They were a good family with a long, you know, of course everyone came over on the Mayflower, damn boat should have sunk. But they were kind of country people, and my mother was a city person. She liked dressing up and parties and glamour. And the reason that it was such a mismatch was because they only knew each other for a number of weeks before they got married. Don't forget, in that era, back in the 20s, people did not get intimate until they were married for the most part. And I think that was probably a driving force, because they were extremely drawn to one another. So anyway, here I was, a little tiny person living in Philadelphia, and I already had a brother and a sister, Liz your aunt is 4 years older than I am, and Edward was 2 years older. And they were living in this apartment, and Daddy got called to service. He loved God, country, war, shooting birds, you know, that kind of thing. He wasn't very well educated. He graduated from high school, but he didn't go on to college. So he was really excited about World War II because he wanted to go, you know, show up for his country. He was a great patriot. Well, my mother was left with these 3 babies, and we probably had a nanny too. So she upped and moved us to 955 Park Avenue, and that's where I grew up. I think I was probably around 2 when I left Philadelphia. And we had, often people think, oh, well, because you lived, you know, on Park Avenue, you must have been very well heeled, but that's not true at all. We lived around the corner from my great-grandmother. Granny Ewing was born the year that Lincoln took office, and I knew her. Did I ask her any questions? No. So self-centered, never even thought of it. Anyway, my mother felt more secure living close by to a relative, and our apartment was under rent control, so it was very affordable. Now, at that time, my mother must have been subsidized by relatives, especially Granny Ewing and maybe some other relatives. Her mother was dead. Her dad, they divorced, so she never spoke about him. And I think her other grandfathers were dead too. So there was just Granny Ewing that I know of. Can you pause it for a moment?
Absolutely. All right, and 3, 2.
I don't have too many memories of my childhood, to tell you the truth. I can tell you this about growing up with my parents, and that is that they gave me boundless love, great nutrition. My mother was really, really adamant about a healthy diet, and a good education. And we spent, because I was the youngest, we spent quite a lot of time together. She just adored me. I remember when I was in 8th grade, I had been thrown out of 91st Street Convent for locking a nun on the roof when she was showing a guest around the premises. And then I hid under a table that was about this high with thin legs. Like, who's the person with the rear end under the table? That would be Rebecca. So anyway, they moved me, they transferred me to a boarding school in Greenwich. And it was a very depressing year for me. I didn't have any friends. I only went to school during the week, and then I came home on the weekends. And so I didn't have Greenwich friends, and I didn't have my New York City friends that kind of bailed on me. And my parents' drinking was really getting out of control. And it was a very difficult time. And actually, I would say from about 8th grade on through high school, my home life was awful. But as I say, it wasn't from lack of love, and it wasn't from their good intentions, because they definitely had good intentions, but it's the drinking. The drinking just kind of ruined everything. It was like this big dark cloud that hung over our apartment. And everything that they did, no matter how well-intended or how joyful it should have been, holidays, for example, it was dark. And I was very lonely. My out were boys, but I went to all-girls schools, so that was a little tricky. My brother would set me up with some dregs that couldn't get a date anywhere else. So I got to go to Birdland. I got to hear George Shearing. I got to do many exciting things, but here's the caveat. I'd already started drinking myself. So a lot of those things that I did that should have been really memorable occasions were kind of diluted with this alcohol. And all I really focused on was my next excursion. I loved it. I loved drinking. I loved the lack of responsibility I felt when I drank, and it was kind of a schizophrenic lifestyle because during the week I transferred then to Chapin, repeated the 8th grade because they were so advanced from my education at the convent. And rather than go to summer school and try to catch up on all these other courses, I just started over again in 8th grade. So I went to Chapin from 8th grade through 12th. And it was a very wonderful experience for me. I made very close friends. It was demanding, educationally very demanding. I was not a particularly good student. My home life was very distracting. And the schizophrenic part for me was that on the weekend, I was doing wild, crazy things that I couldn't share with anybody. And then during the week, I wore a uniform and I was really in this very disciplined atmosphere and very stimulating intellectually. I took Greek, I took Latin, I took French, everything except math and science. But anyway, so I had this dichotomy in my life that was confusing. And at the end of that, I went off to college. Now, how I happened to pick a Catholic college, I have no memory. I remember that our headmistress, who, by the way, was from another century, Miss Stringfellow, she had gray hair pulled back. She had dark dresses with a little lace here, and she had those pointy granny shoes that lace up. And she was extremely conventional. So,
Well, actually, you can leave it on if you want to. Your boobies are starting to have like. I don't think you want to be
Yeah.
distracted by this.
thank you. Oh, I've
One of the things that was very bizarre on that movie. This is where I leave you.
what?
Was Jane Fonda's boobs.
Oh, it was.
How they were distracted.
Oh,
Go.
okay. So anyway, okay. So I took all these difficult courses that didn't translate into jobs, by the way, but that was pretty typical of a classic education in my era. You know, we're talking about the 50s. How I chose this college, I have no idea. I began to realize that there was something very essential missing in my life, and I thought maybe it is because I'm not practicing Catholicism. That's what it is. I have a spiritual deficit. So I picked Newton College of the Sacred Heart. I never visited it. No one had ever heard of it. I don't have a clue. The one thing that happened was the headmistress told me when she was advising me about colleges, because my friends were all going to Wellesley and Radcliffe and Smith. She said, you need a small college where you can get a lot of attention and help, or something like that. Anyway, it didn't feel like a compliment. See, in my era, nobody asked what was going on at home. So it was all, everything was discipline-based. If a student was acting out, and I was always the class clown, I could make everyone laugh, but the teachers didn't appreciate it. So it never occurred to anybody to say, maybe something's going on at home. Maybe she needs some counseling. Maybe she needs a little